It's time for Comeback Sports with Brandon, the coach Perry, and Pat, the shot caller Flaherty. Here we go.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Comeback Sports, our weekly sports topic show. We give you 10 topics about sports happening across the country, across the globe, folks. My name is Pat, the shot caller Flaherty, and as always, I am joined by my partner, Brennan, the coach Perry. Brennan, first of all, thanks so much for filling in for me last week, man. Doing the show by yourself, that's yeoman's work. Fantastic job.
Well, I was just telling producer Ben, the coach's specials are sometimes tough. My mouth gets a little dry, but luckily I'm used to talking to a crowd. I want to give a big shout out to my team today. My basketball team won today, and we're going to keep it rolling.
Nice. Can't believe high school basketball season's already starting. This is unreal. But yeah, you did a great job last week, man. I get hoarse after like 2 topics. So I don't know how you did a whole show like that. But we're going to keep rolling here on Comeback Sports, folks. As always, you can follow us on social media. Check out our Twitter handles at the bottom of the screen. Folks, if you want to call into the show, check out that call-in number at the very top of your screen right there. You can call in live. You can call in after the show and leave a voicemail as well. We'll play it back on the next upcoming show as well, folks. And also, you can dip into our live chat on YouTube on Comeback Sports. There's a live chat right now. We've got our very loyal listener, Ruzaman Reese, Jabbar 760, who's been there the past couple of weeks as well. Really appreciate those folks who are constantly watching our show. They're huge the show's success, and you could be a big part of the show's success too if you go to Comeback Sports on YouTube and subscribe to our Comeback Sports channel on YouTube. That can really help us out. We're going to kick things off here with topic number 1, folks, and that's going to be Hammer Time at Jeddah. Of course, over the weekend, any F1 fans saw that Lewis Hamilton once again takes home first place on the circuit there. Winning at Jeddah, and just a very controversial race, but a race nonetheless that Hamilton won. He ties up with Max Verstappen in total points for the season. In the driver's standings, Brandon, I'll let you take off with this one. Lewis Hamilton winning another one.
I mean, 3 in a row at this point now for Lewis Hamilton, going back to Interlagos, and now the 2 brand new tracks of Qatar and now Saudi Arabia, the Jeddah track. The Jeddah Cornish Street Circuit, which people had no clue how exciting the racing would be. And it turned out to be a super fast track, the fastest street circuit on the calendar. And it's also the second longest circuit on the calendar now. So putting those 2 together, you know, it just turned out to be an amazingly fast track where we saw some craziness go on both sides, you know, craziness from safety issues with crashes, from some sections that maybe were a little too tight, maybe need to be widened up. And then from some other drivers that really just showed poor racecraft, poor race etiquette. I'm talking specifically about Max Verstappen, and we're going to get to him more later on. But let's get back to Lewis Hamilton winning his 3rd Grand Prix in a row, evening up the championship, going into Abu Dhabi now with a chance to win the title outright with another win, and that would make it 4 in a row. And I mean, we talk a lot of times, and I know specifically as a coach, I talk about when it's crunch time, that's when the champions show up. And now we have been in crunch time, and the champion himself, Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, is looking to get his grips on number 8 and really solidify himself as the greatest driver of all time. I personally think he has already done that. But with number 8, nobody will be able to argue that he is the greatest driver of all time. His race at Jeddah was perfect. The car suited the track nicely, and we think the car is going to suit nicely to Abu Dhabi as well. But, man, he really put it down there. If you compare him to his teammate, Bottas at times got stuck behind other drivers and really could not make passes immediately, where Lewis Hamilton applied the pressure on Max Verstappen nonstop, was going to make several passes on Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen showed a lot of poor racing, poor driving etiquette. I mean, it was so disappointing to see a race turn out like that. Max Verstappen ended up getting 15 seconds worth of penalties for the type of driving that he was doing. And we've been talking about it, how all season Lewis Hamilton has been having to take evasive action against Max Verstappen, or there's going to be crashes, incidents, more crashes like the one at Monza. That's nothing that we want to see as race fans. That's nothing as we want to see as F1 fans. But Max Verstappen keeps pushing the limit, pushing the envelope, and really breaking the rules now at this point, week after week on track with, I would even call it dirty driving at this point, and just having no respect for his competitor. Luckily, the stewards this week saw it fitting to give him the penalties, and they have to keep it consistent throughout the rest of the season, especially going into Abu Dhabi. But no matter what, he couldn't hold back Lewis Hamilton from going on to win this race at Jeddah, even with a brake check where he took off Lewis Hamilton's front wing. That didn't bother the king of F1. He kept putting in faster and faster laps, even with a damaged car, goes on to win the race and leave Max Verstappen in his dust.
Yeah, just a masterful performance again by Lewis Hamilton. I know you mentioned on last week's show that this track in particular, about 79% full throttle, right? Because there's more straightaways on this track than any other track on the, on the circuit. So it made sense that Mercedes was going to have a good run here. You saw Hamilton, obviously, he won the race, but then Bottas kind of out of nowhere picked up the third place and picked up podium, passing Albon. So, it was just a crazy good race there for Mercedes here towards the end of the year. And this is what we wanted, right? This is the build up, that the points are now even heading into the end of the year. Of course, crazy things could happen in this last race. Right now, Verstappen is technically still ahead because he has 9 first-place finishes, where Lewis Hamilton has 8. So, but everything's going to come down to this upcoming weekend. We're going to talk more about this upcoming weekend and of course, about what Max did in this last race in the next couple of topics. But it's just still like Lewis Hamilton, just didn't panic. Verstappen was so far ahead, but Hamilton just came back towards the end of this year and towards the end of the season. He rips off 3 wins in a row. And it's not like, Max is, coming in 5th or coming in, just barely cracking the top 10. Verstappen's getting podiums too, but Hamilton's winning the races. That's why he's able to tie up Max here at the end of the year. That's why he is where he is. It's just unbelievable that he's gotten this far, considering how much he was trailing earlier in the season. And we were saying, is Mercedes punting on the season because of the rule changes next year? But that certainly wasn't the case. They're still going for that top spot.
Strategic gains is what I'm calling it. Like, they knew what tracks they were going to have to be good at, and they've put all their bets on it, and it's paid out right so far, and it's all coming down to the end. Both sides having a chance to win the championship. I think any driver, any team that's exactly the position they want to be in the final race. So it's going to be an exciting one. We all want to see a clean, competitive race. Nobody wants to see a champion that crashes people out. Nobody wants to see a champion that crashes people out. So we all want to see a clean, competitive race, and hopefully that's exactly what we're going to get at Abu Dhabi. But just quickly, you mentioned Bottas coming across the line there to snag the podium away from Esteban Ocon, pretty much right at the line. But Ocon took it with a, joking manner. He was certainly mad, obviously right on track. But later on, went to his Instagram and he loaded up a scene from the Fast and the Furious when one of the guys is just basically getting passed right at the line, and he goes, "No!" It was absolutely classic. So he's at least still enjoying that he is fighting for podiums and finished 4th. But man, you got to give this masterclass to Lewis Hamilton, dropping the hammer down at Jeddah and getting the win. Let's move on to topic number 2. Topic number 2 is the Jester of Jeddah, and we're talking about the clown himself and the biggest clown of them all, Max Verstappen. Max Verkrashen, Max Ver whatever you want to call him at this point. I'm sick of the guy at this point. I've come to now dislike him as a driver and as a person, because the way that he's trying to win this title over these last 3 races, basically willing to crash out his opponent at any point in time or looking to damage his opponent's car just to win the race. It's not fair. It's non-competitive. It's disgusting. It's dirty. His racecraft has been poor. His race etiquette has been poor. The stewards, luckily here in Jeddah, deemed it fit to penalize that type of driving. It should always be penalized. The FIA has to be more consistent across the board and penalize bad driving, over-aggressive driving, and drivers that overstep the bounds and push the limits. We always talk about how safety is number one in F1. Well, this guy is now trying to basically crash people out, crash people into the walls at the Jeddah track, where the walls were basically right on top of you, an average lap of 156 miles per hour. And this guy's trying to crash people out and put them into the wall, brake checking people. And I mean, this brake check that he put on Lewis Hamilton was a massive brake check. We're talking about a deceleration from about 125 miles an hour down to 50 in a matter of a blink of an eye. And he's expecting Lewis Hamilton to know what's going on behind him. No, of course, there's contact now, and it cost Lewis Hamilton his wing. Luckily, Lewis is the champion, the lion, the king of F1. He still goes on to win the race with a damaged car. But at this point, Lewis Hamilton has now even commented saying Max Verstappen pushes the limit and crosses that limit routinely now and overdrives and oversteps boundaries, spoken boundaries that have been in F1 for over 50 years at this point, which is to protect drivers and for clean and competitive racing. He got hit with 15 seconds worth of penalties in one race. If we look at penalty points over the last 12 months, the guys that are leading are Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. They both have 7 penalty points in 12 months. They're both on Red Bull, by the way. Lewis Hamilton has 2 penalty points in 12 months. So compare that, 7 penalty points in 12 months compared to 2 in 12 months. If you get 12 in 12 months, you automatically get a race ban. So Max Verstappen is approaching race ban territory because his driving has been so poor, so dirty, and crossing the line routinely. We're all praying that he wants to have a clean, competitive race in Abu Dhabi, but I'm not expecting that at all. What I am expecting is Max Verstappen to try to crash Lewis Hamilton out of the race so he can win the championship based on the tiebreaker that you brought up earlier, which is wins. I'm fully expecting Max Verstappen to try to take out Lewis Hamilton in this race. I know and I hope and pray Lewis is expecting the same and Mercedes is expecting the same, and they've got to try to defend it. The best defense is his teammate, Valtteri Bottas. If Valtteri Bottas can put himself in P2 on the grid and get a great start and put himself in between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, Lewis will be able to drive off and we will get a clean and competitive race at that point, hopefully. But I'm telling you, Max Verstappen is routinely crossing the line at this point, and no more needs to be done to penalize him.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest worry, like you mentioned, is that, you know, they're both tied in points, but Verstappen has one more win. So if they both crash and are if they're both disqualified, they don't finish the race. Neither of them get points, and then Verstappen maintains that top spot because he's got more first place finishes and he wins this. He's the champion this season. So, you know, that could be a strategic move by him. Of course, you know, the stewards would have to get involved, and then, you know, they would probably try to figure out if he crashed on purpose, that sort of thing. But that's the worry. I mean, you just, because of how aggressive and overly aggressive he is as a driver, you worry about that. We've all been waiting for this scenario to come out where these two drivers have the same amount of points, and you have this finish of the season that's one of the best finishes in a long time, and you don't want it to be marred by a crash, you know. So that's what you're hoping for. Like you mentioned, you know, if Bottas can help out his teammate a little bit and kind of box out Verstappen a little bit. I know Verstappen in this past race got a little frustrated with Bottas doing that, but it's not illegal. So, you know, that's totally, you know, above board there for everybody. So we'll see what happens with this upcoming race. I mean, this past race, you know, he had the one where he cut off Lewis Hamilton. You know, I think it was lap 10, or maybe it was a little bit later than that. And then, like you mentioned, the one where, you know, he was supposed to let Hamilton go by him because of the penalty, and then he basically just like floored on his brakes, and just Hamilton was like, what? He didn't have enough time to react because he just slammed on his brakes so quickly, like you mentioned, and decelerated so much. You're supposed to kind of gradually decelerate and let that other driver go by you instead of just kind of doing it right away. Because I'm sure Max was frustrated that he had to let Hamilton go by him, you know, because of that penalty, and just, you know, kind of almost like a tantrum, like just stomped on his brakes like that, and then a dangerous, you know, situation resulted from that. So like you said, we hope that Verstappen is not like this next weekend. You know, because if he causes a crash and he eventually wins, it's just dumb, because then people are going to look back in history and they're going to know that the reason why he won against Hamilton was because of a crash instead of because he earned it. You know, Verstappen's talented enough and good enough, and Red Bull's good enough to just win the race outright. You don't got to do this kind of stuff. You know, they're too good to be doing this kind of stuff. So, you know, we all hope, F1 fans, we hope that Verstappen does this cleanly, and, you know, may the best driver win is what should happen this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I think you just said it beautifully. May the best driver win. May the quickest driver win outright, and we get to see one of the best seasons ever. And just quickly, you know, this topic had me so fired up, I forget to pass it over to you, and I changed up the whole way we're doing the show. You know what I mean? So realistically, we should be moving on to topic number 3 here, producer Ben, because I changed it all up. I just started talking about the Jester of Jeddah and didn't want to hand it off. But I'm telling you, this guy's a clown. He's got to clean up his racing. Let's move on to topic number 3. Take it away, Pat.
Yeah, topic number 3, track at Abu Dhabi. This is a newly sort of renovated track. They've had other races there before. They've had other events. They've had cycling, I believe, at this location as well in years past. So brand new track at Abu Dhabi. Very different than Jeddah. This one has a lot of turns and a lot of different corners as compared to the 79% straightaways at Jeddah. So very interesting track to kind of finish the season off. Brendan, what do you expect out of this track, and what do you think, you know, which team do you think is in a better situation to take home this one?
First off, I love the update that they made to Yas Marina Circuit, which is the circuit that's taking place there in Abu Dhabi for this final round of the championship. It was a great track before. A night race. We all love night races. I mean, in the Middle East, they don't have many options. If you have a day race, the tires are just screaming because of the heat. And so it's a really tough race. It's a guaranteed 2-stop, which sometimes that might be better and more exciting. But I think if you have a day race in the heat, it's the drivers don't like it mainly. So these night races are exciting. There's more grip for the cars. These tracks are super fast here in the Middle East. And I'll tell you what, like I said, the track was amazing at Abu Dhabi before, but now it is a lot better. They have redesigned the track and changed it in 2 major areas to create more overtakes. And that's what we love seeing in Formula One. We love seeing wheel-to-wheel racing and overtakes at 200 plus miles per hour. This track is now set up for that. They made a huge change in Sector 1 when you come over the top of the hill. And it used to be, I call it like a bus stop chicane, which you would have to go into a quick or slow speed left and a slow speed right that would then set you up into the hairpin. Now, they've now taken out that bus stop chicane. And when you come down the hill, you go down full gas, straight down, full board, leading into the hairpin. So now it's a race. It's a sprint down into the hairpin, which will be a heavy braking zone. We'll see a ton of overtakes there. We'll see a ton of battling going into that hairpin, which then goes on to a super back straight. This is showing it right here. This is going to be amazing. And like I said, that's right in Sector 1 leading into Sector 2, and it's going to be a great part of the track. Then in the marina section of the track, there was also another basically bus stop chicane that was even slower, where it was so hard to pass, nearly impossible to get 2 cars through there at a time. So you had to make your passes before getting into that section and then pretty much hold off to even make an overtake until you got back into the straightaway on the finishing straight or into Sector 1. Nope. Now we're going to see some overtaking going into the marina, because now they've looped that into basically a hairpin loop as well. Not a tight one, not as tight as the one in Sector 1, but it's more of a looping section. So it should be a fast section where we'll get to see battling and overtaking going into the marina. That's all lit up. The hotel section, that's all lit up. One of the best parts of the track. You got the yachts. It's just a beautiful track. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think the track layout now is amazing for racing. I do think it now favors the Mercedes car, because the Mercedes car has that top end speed, especially the top end speed we just saw from Lewis Hamilton at Jeddah, Well, now with these straights leading into these hairpins, that Mercedes is going to be on edge. I think Lewis Hamilton is going to be pushing it as fast as he can go, and I do think it favors the Mercedes going in.
Yeah, it makes sense too. With like you mentioned, how this particular track is going to kind of almost promote and entice more overtakes. That's exactly what you want in the final race of the season. You want to see a lot of drama heading into this last race, especially with what's going on to the two top drivers. But, also the other drivers who are involved too. I'm almost kind of hoping that it's not Verstappen and Hamilton that are finishing the podium. I almost want to see them battle it out for like a 5th and 6th place finish or something like that. I don't know why. I just think that would be so interesting because they're kind of grinding for a specific position because they're tied in points. I just think it would be really, really interesting to see them do it that way instead of being the top two guys. That's just me. Or like have it come down to like whoever can earn the fastest lap because that gives you an extra point. That way too. I just think that would be really cool. But I got to imagine one of these guys is gonna earn a podium. But yeah, this new track just seems amazing. I don't know. I can't remember if you just talked about this, but they adjust the track so it goes under the hotel or under the high. It goes under something that I was reading, and it just sounds really cool. I'd love to check. There it is, right there. Yeah, yep. It just sounds like it. The way that they renovated this, I love that. They're trying to tweak this and make this event even better, and that's what you're hoping for an F1. Even though this sport has been around for a long time, when they continue to tweak tracks, it's like when they go to the Masters in golf and they try to like move the tee box back a little bit, or they tighten the fairways or things like that. Very similar here to some of these tracks. And I think that this is the best way to do stuff like this. And especially with this being the last race of the season, they're doing a great job out there.
Yeah, no, they made a huge track adjustment going into that section in the marina section, which leads to right directly under the hotel. Yeah. Oh, beautiful racing that we're going to get to see through that section. It's an amazing track. And yeah, I think when you're looking at competitiveness and you have, competition meetings, people have been asking for a track layout and a track change. And now we finally got one, and it promotes faster racing and more overtakes. So I don't think anybody can complain about this. I think we're going to get an exciting race, and hopefully, like we're all hoping for, a clean, competitive race until the very end. But the thing about those two that you talked about, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen this season, they've routinely been out driving everybody. It's been a two-horse race where they've been ahead of like the guy in third place sometimes by 20 or 30 seconds. Yeah. So I'm kind of expecting a two-horse race again, and we'll see hopefully a competitive, clean two-horse race. But let's move on tonight to topic number 4. The Bearcats and Bama are absolutely balling. We're talking about college football teams that are going to be heading into the college football playoffs now. Now that we know the matchups that we're going to get, man, I'm really looking forward to these games.
Yeah, no question. I actually really want to watch the Cincinnati-Bama one because, this whole season, Cincinnati's been one of those schools outside of the Power 5 schools who's been very competitive over the past couple of seasons. They were really good last year. They lost in their bowl game to Georgia at the end of the season, but it was a competitive game. It wasn't like they got smacked around in the bowl game. And from what I understand, that helped them this year in the rankings. It got them, I think, to start off the season either close to the top 10 or in the top 10. Then Cincinnati goes and beats Notre Dame, I believe at Notre. No, I think it was an away game. I can't remember. But
it was at Notre Dame.
It was at Notre Dame. You're right. They beat Notre Dame, who's now ranked either 5th or 6th. So that's a huge win. That's kind of like a pelt on their wall now that they beat Notre Dame. And then people forget in their conference championship game in the American Athletic Conference, can't believe it's called that now, that they actually beat Houston, who's now ranked 22nd in the country. So some arguments against having Cincinnati in the top 4, I just don't understand because they beat Notre Dame, who's a top 5, top 6 team. They beat another top 25 team in the conference championship game. They've earned their spot in the playoffs. They just have. I mean, I understand, there's arguments about they're going to get killed by Alabama. I mean, Alabama could kind of kill anybody, in the top 25. That doesn't necessarily mean Cincinnati, but they earn their way there. So let's see what happens. I think we need to kind of just lay back as college football fans and say, let's see what Cincinnati can do. They have a really good coach, quarterback's very savvy. I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This isn't the indestructible Alabama team we're used to seeing. They're still Alabama. They still played great in the SEC title game. but they're not infallible. I think Young is really, really good, but he's still kind of, he's a sophomore, but this is really his first full college football season as a starter because he was sitting behind Mac Jones as a freshman. So, he still can make mistakes. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Cincinnati tries to match up against Alabama in that aspect as well. This is going to be a fun game, and it's very cool to see a team like Alabama, who's, everybody figured would be in the playoffs, and a team like Cincinnati, who's really had to earn their way there, being undefeated. And I think this is a great matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. They're the only team in the top 4 that's even undefeated. So I don't want to hear anybody saying that they don't belong there. They've run the table, man, and they've beat some really good teams, like you said, Notre Dame, Houston. And guess what? All these other college football teams were looking to knock them off and make sure they didn't even get to this point. Yep. And they knocked them off as well. This team ran the table. They belong in the college football playoffs, but now's the time when we're going to see if they really belong in the college football playoffs, because now they got to play Alabama, a team that has traditionally been up there, a team that is traditionally a powerhouse legend, right? A multi-championship team. So now it's their team. I've got to give a shout out to Coach Luke Fickell, though, of Cincinnati. Done an amazing job this year, really leading this team, putting them in a position to go and win the title. That's all you can ever want with any team. And they've broke a record. They've made history already by being the first non-Power 5 team to make the college football playoffs. So I'm really excited to see them play in this game against Alabama, an Alabama team that is obviously hitting on all cylinders right now at the right time, coming off a big win against Georgia in the SEC championship, where Bryce Young just looked amazing, man, throwing for basically 350, 400 yards, doing it all, didn't blink an eye. Their defense looked amazing against a number 1 defense in Georgia. So, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing a great coach team in Cincinnati with Desmond Ridder, too. Let's not forget Desmond Ridder, the quarterback of Cincinnati, has been amazing this year. So a team that's great coach, great quarterback in Cincinnati against another great coach team that has been a traditional powerhouse with a young, explosive quarterback. This is going to be the best game to watch in the college football playoffs. I've still got to go with Alabama. I've got to give the nod to Alabama, and I've got to give the nod to Georgia. I think we're going to see a rematch of Alabama and Georgia in the national championship game.
Yeah, I think the BCS advisory board agrees with you. That's why they didn't put Georgia as 4th. They put them as 3rd for that very specific reason. They didn't want them matching up again in the first round of the playoffs. But we'll see what happens. If Cincinnati can upset Alabama, it'll be one of the biggest upsets in a long time. And they will certainly have earned it heading into the national championship game if they are able to upset Alabama. But we'll see. We got almost a month to talk, not a month, but probably like 3 weeks to talk about it, as those 2 playoff games are happening on New Year's Eve. But that's going to do it, folks, for topic number 4. Staying with college football here on topic number 5, and Freeman is fighting for the Irish. The Notre Dame, after Brian Kelly left to go to LSU, Notre Dame, as a lot of people I think expected, named Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, as the head coach of the Fighting Irish. I think this is a great hire. I think a lot of people have probably seen, if you're a college football fan, you saw the reaction of the players when their strength and conditioning coach announced that Freeman was going to be the head coach. He kind of like burst through the door in the locker room, and every player was like just giving him a bear hug. It was awesome. This guy has kind of been rumored to be the next guy for Notre Dame, Brandon, but I got to think that this is a good hire here for Notre Dame.
No, this is an amazing hire for Notre Dame, and it was the right one for their program, the correct one for the timing, especially when you just lose to your coach, Brian Kelly, in like kind of an overnight situation to LSU. So you're looking for a coach on short notice, and you don't even know where to look. Well, Marcus Freeman has been on the top of a lot of universities' lists for a long time, including, like you said, Notre Dame as a possible replacement. And so this is a perfect fit for Notre Dame. He knows the program. He's been on campus already. The kids know him. They love him. When I want to keep saying Chip Kelly, but not Jim Kelly, Brian Kelly. When Brian Kelly left, they even polled the players and saying, who would you want as your next coach? Number one was Marcus Freeman. All the players said they wanted Marcus Freeman to be their coach. If Notre Dame had went out and brought in an outside coach, you would literally spoil your program and pretty much piss off 90% of your players. And now you want them to play for this new guy, a new guy that they might not even respect, that's going to have to earn their respect. No, Marcus Freeman has already done that. He's going to have control of that locker room, number one. We're talking about a team that finished 5th in the standings, a team that is set up for future success. Marcus Freeman is the guy to take the Irish back to the top, a defensive coordinator that I think is going to do a great job of organizing this team, bringing the energy, as you see in this video, and the players love him. They respect him. This was a great hire for Notre Dame football, and he's obviously making history as the first African-American head coach in Notre Dame history. So this is huge. This is huge for, minority coaches, big for Notre Dame to keep their program and their momentum rolling. I think their players love this. This was the perfect call for Notre Dame football.
Yeah, no question. Just a quick correction, Brandon. Sorry to do this to you. Ty Willingham was actually the first head. Yes, I know. It's like you forget. He was so long ago. You just forget it because Kelly's been there for so long. Brian Kelly's been there over 10 years.
Willingham. Wow.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a blast from the past. But
that's a throwback. Well, yeah, you're so right though. That's like early 2000s, right?
Early to mid 2000s. But I think the way that Brian Kelly left this team, we talked about this off the show, as you talked about on the show last week, how I'm a Notre Dame fan. I wasn't even upset that Kelly left. I mean, I think he's a really good coach. I think he's going to do really well at LSU. I understand why he left. You get a different kind of recruit when you're at LSU. You get a different kind of recruit when you're playing the SEC and you're one of the traditional powers in the SEC. But the way that he sent a text message to his team saying, all this stuff like I love you and all this kind of things, all he had to do was, as soon as the news broke, say, hi guys, I didn't want this to come out before I had a chance to talk to you. Let's meet in the locker room at such a time tomorrow morning or whatever. And then he should have spent hours in there, but he spends like 10 minutes in there after all the guys find out that he's leaving. And it just seemed disingenuous. He might not have felt that way, but it came across that way. So when you have something like that happen to these players and then he leaves, you got to get a guy in there who they think is genuine. You got to get a coach in there who they think is going to be there for a long time, who they know really well, because they just had this guy who they loved, then kind of just like walk away and just kind of by a text message, So there's no easy way for a coach to leave a program because a lot of coaches do it all the time. But I just thought Kelly's way of doing it was just insincere. But now you get a guy that's very sincere in Marcus Freeman, who they know really well. He's been rumored to be the next guy. Now he's there. The future is now. I think this is a great hire by Notre Dame. This makes all the sense in the world for the Irish.
Yeah, me and you were both talking, being like, oh, you just don't do it like that. That's just a poor way to do it as a coach. Walking away from a program like that, you just don't do it like that. So, yeah, I'm agreeing with you on that one. And yeah, I think they're set up for future success with Freeman, and we'll have to see what he can do with a team. Like I said, that's 5th overall right now in the rankings. So we'll see what they can do going forward. Let's move on to topic number 6. Now, college football is pretty much big business when it comes for coaches, and I think that's really what we're seeing here, with a lot of these coaches skipping town so fast to go to a new university, big contracts. Just before we came online, it was rumored that there was one of these other big teams, I think it was Miami, was offering Jimbo Fisher some big money to try to get there. But no, then they realized that they had to get their number one guy, bring him back to Miami, who had been there previously, and that's Mario Cristobal.
Yeah, and this one is sort of sleazy, I guess, in a different way than a Brian Kelly situation. Manny Diaz was under contract with Miami for 2 more seasons, and coaches get fired, before their contract ends. It happens all the time. Charlie Weiss had a massive contract at Notre Dame. He was making money as the Notre Dame head coach 4 or 5 years after he got fired. But you have that. Then you have Cristobal, who's still under contract at Oregon, and Miami's talking to Cristobal before they've even fired Manny Diaz. Then Oregon says, okay, that he's thinking about going back to Miami. Oregon offers him $10 million for 10 years, $85 million. So that's 8.5 per year. And then Miami comes back with a similar offer, 10 years, $80 million. Cristobal was the offensive coordinator at Miami years ago under Larry Coker. Then I believe he went on to coach at Florida Atlantic. And you know, he's a kind of a Miami guy. That's kind of how he grew up as a coach. So it makes total sense that he wants to go back to Miami. But it's just, again, it's like, you know, these two coaches are under contract and one gets fired, one moves on. And it's just, you know, things are different now with players where they enter the transfer portal. They can leave a school if a coach decides to leave. But it is a tough situation in college sports when a coach leaves, which I totally understand, for more money or a better situation. You know, the coaches have to think of their families and things like that. But then now the players can kind of leave, you know, when the coach leaves. But still, it's like you're at college, you're about to, you know, embark on your college career. And then all of a sudden your coach leaves and now you're leaving again. And it's like there's so much has happened with the pandemic in college sports and players missing seasons and players kind of opting out. And now like all this coach movement. And it's just kind of been a jumbled mess the past couple of years. So this is sort of like the frustrating part about college sports. Now, luckily, again, the players can leave if a coach leaves. So it's not like it used to be where a coach would break their contract, go to another school, and players would be stuck at that school unless they wanted to sit out a year and transfer. So, you know, the NCAA has adjusted this a little bit at least. And, of course, the NLI thing where they can now kind of make money. And, you know, things are getting better in this situation. But still, this college football especially, but it happens in college basketball too. The coaching carousel is just, it just still feels a little dirty despite the players being in a little bit better situation than they were. But yeah, I think Cristobal, it makes sense. It's a good hire. We'll see what he can do down in Miami. I mean, if you're down in Miami, we talked about this before with the 3 big time programs in Florida. You got to recruit well in the state. And if you're Miami, you got to recruit South Florida really well. And I think that's what Cristobal is going to do. I think that's why he got hired.
No, I do think this is a great hire, but it does show how college sports is a big business. And you brought up the NIL being involved now too, and that even proves it more that it's big business. They've started to realize that even more. But it definitely is for these coaches who are making like sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. Yep. And getting offered big contracts for over a decade. You know, like I said, they could get fired after a couple years, but sometimes if they're smart, written in that contract, they're still getting all that money and they're getting paid years later. So it just shows how much money is involved in college sports and how college sports is still a big business attitude per se, with people being like, I'm going to jump ship, or I'm going to jump ship real quick for some more money. But you bring up a good point where sometimes these players are really committing to coaches and not the actual school. So when their coach leaves, they want to leave too, because that's who they're really there for. They're there to get developed by the coach and have that relationship with the coach, and maybe have that coach push them to the next level. And they can get that at a lot of different universities. So that's just really one of those things where you're seeing them commit to the coach and not the school. And I think that's where the current situation is with college sports across the board. That's not college football. That's college sports across the board, like I said.
Right.
But Mario Cristobal, I do think this is a great hire for them, bringing a guy back that, like you said, has Miami written all over him. He's a South Florida guy. He's been on their staff prior. I think even the kids that he's still got on this team that weren't his scholarship kids per se, they're going to jump in, respect this guy, like this guy right away. You never hear anything bad about Mario Cristobal. A great defensive guy, a great offensive guy, a great organizational guy. This is a type of guy that you want leading your football team. Did an amazing job at Oregon. I think he's going to do even better job here at Miami. And the rumor has it that first night that he got hired, he was in South Florida at a 4-star recruit cornerback's house looking to get him to commit immediately on day one. That's the type of recruiting that we said needs to happen. And I'm expecting Miami to make a push back to get into that true big 3 of Florida. But let's move on tonight to topic number 7.
Yeah, topic number 7, folks. Were we too early on Tua? You know, Tua Tagovailoa, who was drafted by the Dolphins, speaking of Miami, 2 years ago, and all the other quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, those guys, who were drafted in the same year, all 3 of them in the top 10, have had really nice starts to their careers, except for Tua. It's been sort of a struggle. Got hurt a little bit last year. People were questioning why he was playing instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick. but he's been a little bit better here in the second half of the season. Brandon, what do you think about Tua sort of improving so far in his second year?
Yeah, I think it's number one, injuries. Injuries have basically stunted his development. He's got to be on the field more. He's got to stay healthy. This guy's got to hire a full-time trainer, a full-time masseuse, a full-time chef, like everything to keep his mind, body, and soul in like great playing form. Because when he's on the field, this guy can do it. He can tear it up. We're talking about a great athlete, a great quarterback, makes good decisions, has a good arm, can move the pocket with his legs. I've always loved what you get from Tua. We're talking about a kid that when he was in college football, stepped into one of the biggest games there was, the national championship game, on short notice, went out and won that game. He's got the guts that you want to lead your football team, to lead your offense. So I love Tua. He's got to stay on the field. He's got to stay healthy. All these quarterbacks that come out of Alabama are NFL ready. I'm expecting the next one, Bryce Young, to come out and be NFL ready again. You look at Mac Jones having a great season with the Patriots at 9-4. Don't think many people called that. I know I certainly didn't. Got to give Mac Jones his credit. I didn't think he was going to be doing this good. He's certainly playing amazing. Jalen Hurts doing an amazing job there in Philadelphia when he gets on the field and when he can stay healthy as well. So I just think these Alabama quarterbacks are coming out NFL ready. They're ready to go. They've been coached by NFL coaches, Nick Saban, Bill O'Brien. So I just think these guys are ready to go. You got to still put your money on Tua. I think this is what Miami's still doing, unless they pull that trigger to get Deshaun Watson, which is still an option going into the new season when trades are available again. I think that's when we'll get the real answer. If they pass on Deshaun Watson, we'll get the answer that they know they've got their guy, or they think they've got their guy for the future with Tua.
Yeah, I think just in general with these young quarterbacks, you just don't know if they're the guy until like 3 seasons in. I still think, even though I'm a big fan of Mac Jones as a Patriots fan, I'm excited. This guy we think is going to be the starter for a long time. Still hasn't even finished his first season yet. So we're still not 100% sure. We think he's going to be a very solid, above average, if not better, starter in the NFL for a long time. Very smart and so forth. And with Tua, I think folks, because he was a top 10 pick and he had all this hype when he was at Alabama, people expected him just coming right away and be really good. And then, people forget halfway through his junior season at Alabama, he dislocated his hip. So that not only was he coming back from an injury, he hadn't played as, he was away from football for a little while, and Mac Jones took over. So, as a young quarterback, he came out as a junior. He still didn't have a ton of starts under him. So you couple that with coming back from an injury, you've got a pandemic season last year where he's still trading reps with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And it's like the guy just didn't get enough reps and enough game time. He was going to struggle in the beginning. I mean, it just made total sense. And Miami doesn't have a plethora of weapons that he can throw the ball to. At least he didn't last year. This year, he struggled in the beginning. He got hurt. And then he comes back. And I know in the beginning of the season, Miami was 1-4. Then they get into the month of November after their bye week. They win, I think, 4 or 5 straight games. I mean, Tua's completing almost 78% of his passes in those 4 or 5 straight. It was 4 straight wins where he's competing almost 78% of his passes. He's got 5 touchdowns to 1 interception in those 4 games. And you're just seeing an improvement. And I think you just have to look at it like you just got to give this guy time. A lot of folks thought that Joe Burrow was going to be ready right away. He was. Then he tears his ACL, but he was ready to go right away. I think also the fact that Tua was taken one spot before Justin Herbert. Dolphins fans are like, look at this guy Herbert who's throwing missiles to all his receivers all over the field. How come Tua isn't doing that? Did we take the wrong guy? Well, Herbert clearly seems to be a better quarterback. I think it'd be shocking to think that Tua would surpass Herbert as a quarterback, but you never know. But you still have a guy who I think is really good. And he doesn't have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And last year, Herbert had Hunter Henry and Austin Eckler to throw the ball out in the flat to. He doesn't have those guys. So give Herbert Tua some time. They've designed a little bit more to get Jalen Waddle involved more. Jalen Waddle's been awesome lately too. So you have those 2 guys hooking up a lot down in Miami. So whether or not he gets traded for Deshaun Watson, that doesn't mean he's not going to be a good quarterback either. He might go to Houston and become a good quarterback. So, I think we were too early to really say Tua's not the guy. We still don't know yet either. I mean, he could be terrible down the stretch this season too. So there's still a lot to happen here. But I think, as in general on these quarterbacks, we just got to pump the brakes a little bit. We do it in every sport. We talk about, athletes, either they're good or they're great or they're terrible right away. And it just takes time for these athletes to get acclimated into the pro sports that they're entering into.
Yeah, no, he needs more time. I think that's clear. And like I said before, the injuries have definitely stunted his growth. Their number one receiver, their number one receiving target, Devontae Parker, was on the injured reserve, I believe, for the first half of the season. Believe he now is just coming off the injured reserve. So you're going to have a true number one wide receiver target out there to actually help him out here down the stretch. I think we're going to even see the best of Tua here over these next few games. But let's move on tonight to topic number 8, the Lonely Lions. Lions timely win. The lonely Lions managed to pull out a last-second win against the Minnesota Vikings, who were taking a nap on defense, I like to say.
Yeah, it's just good to see the Lions win this game. Once again, Minnesota in a really tight game down the stretch. But after everything that happened with the Oxford High School shooting in Michigan last week, a few days after that, the Lions finally pick up their first win of the season. Coach Campbell, obviously very emotional. I still don't know if Coach Campbell's a good coach or not. I mean, he's just one of those guys that's very energetic. From what I understand, he's very genuine. And he's kind of one of those guys that players do appreciate playing for. Whether or not he's a good head coach, who knows? But the Lions have been in close in a lot of games this year. They just haven't been able to kind of finish it off with a win. So it was good to see them win this game, and especially what happened this week. I don't think they're going to rip off like 4 or 5 wins now. I just don't think they're good enough, and do they play well enough? I don't think Jared Goff's good enough. But for this particular season and for Michigan and for that area that had such a terrible tragedy, I think this was a great thing this weekend for the Lions.
Yeah, no, huge win, big win for the area, big win for the organization. You never want to go winless, right? I mean, you want to go undefeated. So to go winless is just not what you want, especially in professional sports, where a lot of people are getting paid a lot of money, man, and they have a great stadium. I always want to bring that up with the Detroit Lions. Great stadium, a great football atmosphere. The people of Michigan love football. So you've got knowledgeable fans. You've got fans that are dedicated. They're loyal, but you never can put out a winning product in that city. They've got to go back to the drawing board and figure it out, whether it's a new GM, a new head coach. And I get it that they've done that over these years. Well, guess what? You still haven't figured it out. Got to go back to the drawing board again. I don't think Dan Campbell is a good head coach. I think he's more of the type that is probably a defensive coordinator or a coordinator type. To me, he's even more of a college strength and conditioning coach with the way that he handles himself and the things he says and the way he acts. In his first press conference, he talked about biting off people's kneecaps. He usually do that talking in the weight room. And I just don't think he's the type of guy that can lead an organization to have a successful season. Not saying he's a bad coach. I do think he's a good coach. I just don't think he should be a head coach. And I just don't think you're going to see much more of this Lions team. I like Jared Goff. He's not an elite player. I do think he's better than some of these other quarterbacks that are in the NFL, specifically the guy that he's always going to be like compared against, Carson Wentz. I'd rather have Jared Goff over Carson Wentz every day of the week. And so I don't think he's bad. I think he needs some more weapons around him. They need some better coaching. But this was a big win for the organization and for the city to make sure that they didn't go winless.
Yeah, I mean, one thing as a Detroit fan now, too, is, this isn't the year to tank for a quarterback. There really isn't an elite quarterback coming out of the draft, never mind a couple. So, the Lions aren't necessarily tanking for anything. So this is not the year that you want to, basically almost go winless this season. But, it's good to see them get a win. Maybe this will give them a little confidence going into the next couple of weeks of the season. We'll see how they finish down the stretch. But, folks, that's going to do it for topic number 8. Moving on to topic number 9, and Paige Becker's injury. Paige Becker's one of the best female college basketball players in the country. For UConn, injures her knee with about 38 seconds left to go in the game. They were up by 18. Some people were questioning, should she have come out at that point with an 18-point lead, 38 seconds left. She had a non-contact knee injury, which is going to be out about 6 to 8 weeks, Brandon. Do you think she should have been out at this point, or was it just, the game wasn't necessarily, not necessarily one of those games where she can come out, before the end of the game?
I mean, that's one of those things you never want to question a coach. And it's one of those things, though, I guess, I do like to question coaches. I shouldn't say that. But I think this is one of those moments where you can't put it on the coach. Like, it's one of those freak injuries, a non-contact injury, which means it was probably going to happen whether it was in practice or the next game, too, because that knee had just been weakened over time. So I think you can't put this on the coach. Granted, with 38 seconds down, I'm taking out my best players, and I'm getting in some role players with about a minute left. But I don't think it was that she was still in the game. And I question, do we murder her name? Is it Buchers or is it Beckers? I don't even know. But she
pretty sure it's Beckers. Pretty sure it's Beckers. I know it's spelled differently, but I'm pretty sure it's Beckers.
Okay, because she is clearly the best player in basketball. People are going to be like, how do I know that? I do know she is the best player in women's basketball. I just don't know how to say her name. Give me a break. But I do think, she made history this past week, if you saw, being the first college basketball women player to sign with Gatorade. So I think that's big news. She's going to have to rely on some of that NIL money while she's rehabbing this injury. But honestly, I expect her to come back strong. I expect her to still come back and be the best player in college basketball.
Yeah, we almost we talked about Tua Tagovailoa before, and we almost had this sort of situation with Alabama where they were up by a lot. Tua was left in by Coach Saban. It was the end of the second quarter, and people were questioning if Saban should have taken out Tua before he dislocated his hip. With that situation, it was like, it's the second quarter. Like, I know it's not, the game isn't in doubt at that point, but it's the second quarter. With this game too, the thing that's changed about basketball is teams can come back quickly with this 3-point shot because everybody takes threes now. So in 4 possessions, you can make up a 12-point deficit. So, she probably should have come out maybe with 38 seconds left, but you're not thinking that as a coach when, it's not like they were up by 30. Or 35, they're up by 18, and they might have just gone on a run to just kind of seal it. So it's one of those things where, I'm not going to blame Gino Auriemma for this. Like you said, non-contact injury. She could have done this walking back to the locker room. She could have done this in the practice facility. There's been debate as to whether or not she should be getting more rest. She plays a ton of minutes, and maybe that'll be adjusted, especially when she comes back from the injury. I'm sure she won't play quite as much. Supposedly, she should be back for the conference tournament, if not sooner. So they will have her back for those important games. We'll see how healthy she is. But I don't think you can question Gino for this situation and what time he's going to pull a player out in an 18-point game.
Yeah, no, basketball is a game of runs. They could have made a quick run and got right back in the game. And remember, UConn's been one of the best teams traditionally because they finish games. So that's what I think they were just doing the same thing. Finish the game, get the win, and let's move on. Kind of like we're doing tonight. Let's move on to topic number 10. This is kind of sad news with the Derby winner, Medina Spirit. Some sad news coming out about a great horse, actually.
Yeah, Medina Spirit actually died of a heart attack a few days ago. The Kentucky Derby winner, a lot of folks now know that this particular horse, there's some controversy around this horse because he tested positive for a banned substance that they actually found out was part of an ointment cream that they put on the horse. Sometimes, horse trainers will inject their horses with the substance that is in this cream to boost performance and a performance-enhancing drug. But Medina Spirit, they found out it was part of an ointment cream. Now, that ointment cream can still help boost performance, and you're not supposed to put it on the horse the day of a race. So they're still, they haven't quite had a hearing yet on that whole thing, and now the horse dies. It's just a very sad and sort of awkward situation with this whole thing that happened at the Kentucky Derby. So, of course, you feel bad for the horse. 3 years old. I mean, some horses live into their 20s and maybe even longer. I'm not sure, but even longer. So, it's terrible that this happens to a horse. I know some racing horses. I think this is like the 70th racing horse in California, or 70-something racing horse in California that's passed away this year. Now, I guess it's not just horses that compete on like the Triple Crown, but racing horses across the board. But it seems to be happening a lot. So, I don't know if it's something where they're just racing these horses too much. I mean, he died of a heart attack. There's other horses that die of different things. So, just a sad situation and just sort of a complex situation with the situation that happened at the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, no, this is something they've definitely got to investigate more with this many horses passing away. And I can definitely say a young age. Actually, horses can live until they're in their 50s. So for these horses to be passing away at such a young age, this has got to be investigated on what they're using. In the past, there was the turf. They had to change the turf. Too many horses were breaking their legs, and then they were having to be put down right there on the track. So they've now changed these turfs to be more synthetic. That's happened a lot less. Well, now you've got to investigate these substances more and what they're doing with these horse feeds and what they're doing with their horses to keep these horses alive. Nobody wants to see horses dying for entertainment or animals dying for entertainment. So they've got to clean this up. I think every fan wants to see this cleaned up. But this is sad news. He's kind of like the Barry Bonds of horses, right? The cream and the clear. The cream and the clear of horses. And unfortunately, I think he, passed away early because of that. So they've got to investigate this more. I don't want this investigation to just stop because he's passed away. I still want it to continue so we can get to the bottom of what's going on with these horses. But I love horse racing. I want them to clean it up.
Yeah, it's like any other sport. There needs to be an investigation, and better practices need to be had in horse racing as they do in other sports as well. Folks, that's going to do it for our 10 topics this week. Of course, thank you so much for joining us here on Comeback Sports, folks. As always, you can dip into the live chat. Ruzaman's giving us a lot of good content. He talked about how he doesn't think Max Verstappen is he's young. He's not racing correctly. He's not quite that champion driver yet because of his youth, but he's also driving too recklessly. He also mentioned how Ryan Fitzpatrick was actually playing better than Tua last year, and that's why Tua kind of was forced into the starting situation. Probably wasn't a good situation for anybody last year on the Dolphins. Brandon, I'm going to let you take the final word if you want to answer any of these questions from the live chat here tonight.
I saw Rusman was throwing shots out there at Red Bull, saying the whole Red Bull team's dirty. I don't know if the whole Red Bull team's dirty. I think Sergio Perez has shown great racecraft, clean racecraft, as he always does. I do love some of the Red Bull mechanics, so I don't think it's the whole team, but I really got to question Christian Horner and specifically Max Verstappen at this point with what they're willing to do to get the win on the track, man. It's been disgusting. Hopefully, we're all getting that clean and competitive race we want to see at Abu Dhabi. I'm really looking forward, especially with the track layout now, the track changes. Looking forward to seeing a championship battle on Sunday.
Yeah, this is going to be a massive weekend for F1 racing here at Abu Dhabi. We'll be bringing a lot of review of that race and a lot of reaction to what happens over the weekend on our show next week on Comeback Sports. Once again, folks, thank you so much for joining us here in Comeback Sports. You have our Twitter handles at the bottom of your screen right there, so make sure you check that out. We give you a lot of information from our Twitter handles and in the live link. We always tweet that out before the show as well. Make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to Comeback Sports. It's really going to help us out if you give us that subscription. All the content from this show is fed to your YouTube account when you do subscribe. And finally, you can call in whenever you want, either during the show or leave a voicemail later on. We'll play it back on our show. We put that number up throughout the show, so just go back in the show and check out that number as well. And always, when we have the show, dump into the live chat. Ruzaman's been a very loyal fan. We got some other folks there as well that have given us some of their opinions. We really appreciate you guys who are dumping into that live chat. You're doing a great job. We want to thank you, as always, folks, and we want to thank our producer, Ben Kudo, who does a fantastic job as well. We'll see you next time on Comeback Sports, folks. Have a good night, everybody.